standing behind thingy here, I might punch you out because it's really annoying and breaks my flow. So just a warning. Besides, I'm the last one before the break anyway, so I can just overrun. Fuck that.
There's one. And there's one.
Oh, are we counting? Okay. I had originally designed a slightly different deck, and the title in your program is a slightly different one than what I'm going to be talking about. Because as I was doing that first presentation, I realized about 5 or 6 slides in it was going to be tedious as fuck. And I thought I wouldn't actually want to go to myself. So I decided to switch things up a little bit and make it more about things that I learned doing more than 50 SEO audits, because I've done more than 50 SEO audits. This is me in a nutshell. Yeah. So I've done more than 50 SEO audits in my career, and I've been proper audits, not just a little quick look at a website. I really dig deep into a website. And probably as a result of that, I am the man that I am today, for better or worse. And you learn a lot of things along the way when you do that, because SEO theory is one thing, SEO practice is something slightly different. I mean, you can read all the more fucking blog posts that you want. It's not going to make you a particularly effective SEO unless you start unleashing those theoretic skills into the wild. And you run into the odd little bit and piece that just throws you off, or makes you wonder, or makes you scratch your head and like, okay, what is this? Why is this the way it is? How does this actually work? It just throws you off. And for me, it's also put me to drink. So I sort of consider myself the Tyrion Lannister of SEO to an extent, because I drink and I know things.
Yes. Different height.
Different height. Although to be that short has its advantages. But anyway, this is an easy one. Show of hands, who thinks the maximum length of a title tag is roughly 70 characters? Oh, net being contrarian. All right. Who thinks it's 512 pixels?
No, it can be more.
Can be more? Yeah? How long do you think it is, Arnold?
120 characters?
Nearly there, but you won't keep giving my game away, because most people would say that is the character, 70 characters, 512 pixels. That is a visual limit. That's when Google cuts it off, roughly, and shows the dot, dot, dot. That's not actually how long a title tag can maximally be. There's also a lot of testing done on what Google will actually index as a title tag. And the answer is a bit ambiguous, because one test shows thousands of characters, another test shows 213 characters, another one shows it's words, like 50 or 60 words, when the indexing actually stops. I have a slightly different approach to that, because I, almost by accident, stumbled on another aspect of title tags, which relates to the semantic web, or basically search engines understanding content and being able to use that content in different contexts. I mean, there's some talks here today that mention voice search and screenless interfaces and how people interact with content without actually looking at a screen, like when a voice system reads it out to you. And a lot of that is powered by structured data. So we mark up our content with structured data so that machine systems can use it, understand what it's for, repurpose it in different contexts, etc. And in structured data, there is article markup. Who here has implemented article markup? Excellent. So you can implement article markup, and the headline of an article breaks at 110 characters. So you can have 110 characters in your article, 111, and the article headline breaks. So for me, I use that as my title tag limit. 110 characters. Because for me, that is the moment when the semantic use of your article breaks. If it's over 110, search engines can't use it anymore, because the structured data doesn't validate, and ergo, your content might become less useful over time to these machine systems. So that's lesson 1. Now, whether or not you're going to go back to your clients and say, right, fix this, forget the 70 characters, make it 110 characters, different story. But in practice, in my context, when it comes to optimizing title tags, I just tell my clients, put the most important keywords at the start, make it a reasonably coherent sentence, put your brand name at the end, and make sure it's under 110 characters. The visual limit for me is not that interesting. I don't really care. I'll tell you, I'll put more effort into optimizing the length of meta descriptions, because I want to make my meta descriptions end with like a call to action. Read more, click here, find out today, that sort of stuff. And if you go over that limit, 155, 160 characters, that gets cut off. And I don't want that to be cut off. I don't give a shit about my title being cut off. I care about my meta description being cut off. Despite the fact it's not even a ranking factor. but it does help you win more traffic because more people will click on your little snippet if that meta description is well optimized. So titles, under 110 you're fine. Meta descriptions, test them out to see how far they actually go. That will be lesson 1. Lesson 2, how up to date are the error reports in Google Search Console? It's a bit of a rhetorical question because that's totally not up to date, but there's a bit of interesting things that I discovered recently. Again, in the course of doing an audit and working with a client as they were making these improvements, that I realized exactly why these reports are out of date and how we can hopefully use that to our advantage. This was the case with href tags being implemented on a multilingual website, and we got these errors, and we thought there's no way these are actually errors, because when we implement these href tags on page by page as we're rolling these things out, we double check them, we triple check them, we verify them, we roll them out, and Search Console insists that there are errors, that there's no return tags. Who here has seen similar reports in the Search Console? Yeah, who here thinks Google's full of shit? Thank you very much. The thing is, this relates to the 3 main processes that search engines use when they call the web, index that, and then serve it. And for me, too many SEOs don't understand these processes, because too many people use crawler and indexer in the same breath as if it's the same system. And it totally is not. Googlebot is the crawler, and it's a very simple piece of software. It's very fast. It just looks at source code, follows links, and sends everything it finds to the indexer. The indexer does the interesting bit. That's what Google calls it, the caffeine infrastructure. The indexer actually tries to figure out what it is that it's looking at. This is where the interesting analysis happens. This is where links get extracted. This is where JavaScript is executed. More on that later. And this is where Search Console does the error checking. So what happens is that the crawler finds something new, which then triggers an error and then gets sent to the indexer. The indexer then says, hey, this one has an href tag, but the page I have in the index that it points to doesn't have an href tag. So let's generate an error. The page that it thinks doesn't have a return tag has actually been updated since then and does have a return tag, but hasn't been called yet. So Search Console or the indexer doesn't know about it and generates these errors. And sometimes that can be quite a long time. You sort of have to force Google to call and recall those pages, because all these things about call budget, call optimization, URL optimization, which Dawn knows an awful lot about, by the way. Go and talk to her about that. It can mean that sometimes it can take days, weeks, or months for those pages to actually be called. So that error will stay in your Search Console unless you force Google to recall and re-index those pages. So these error reports, take them with a grain of salt. Of course, we always pay attention to Search Console because we have to. It's one of the best data sets we have. But with the caveat that it's based on index content, and crawling and indexing are different things. So it can take a while for content to be recalled sufficiently that the index gets updated, and then the errors might disappear. How many XML sitemaps can you include in a sitemap index? Anybody has a guess?
Loads.
Yes, loads is not a fucking useful answer.
Say 100.
Yeah, now you can have, I'll tell you. Every individual XML sitemap can have up to 50,000 URLs. Now, I wouldn't quite go that far. I think the optimum index level is about 35,000 URLs. But you can put 50,000 URLs in a sitemap. You can have 500 sitemap index files. So in theory, you can have 500 index files which each have 50,000 sitemaps themselves, and each of those sitemaps has 50,000 URLs. That's an awful lot of pages. In fact, I don't think there's any website out there that has that many pages, but there you go.
Loads.
Facebook maybe, yeah.
Loads.
But it's loads! Yeah! Receptive audience, I fucking love it. There is a problem, however, with that. I mean, you can throw a lot of XML sitemaps at Google. However, there is an issue with how Google Search Console reports that data back to you. Did anybody spot this?
If you've got URLs in different ones, then actually they're counted in.
Yeah, that's one of the problems, but providing you're smart enough to not have the same URLs in different sitemaps, there is this very simple reporting error which I came across not that long ago, and like, why the fuck are you doing this to me, Google? And that's this one. This is a client that has 850 XML sitemaps, because they generate daily sitemaps. They publish 500 articles a day, and every day a new sitemap for those articles gets generated and automatically included in the index sitemap, etc. So what we then want to do is write how many of those daily articles are actually being indexed. And the answer is we haven't a fucking clue, because Google won't show us. because it stops at 400.
You can still add them though.
Oh, they'll still get data out of them, you still get the error from it. But if you just want to look at, right, how many of these pages have been indexed on the latest sitemap, you can't actually very easily get that out of Search Console.
And if you refresh,
This is a one-way conversation, actually, Arno. I'm giving the I appreciate the fact you're trying to participate, but there's time for questions afterwards. So, but by all means, if you want to step on stage, it's fine, man. How many beers have you had over? 400 sitemaps that Google will actually show you information on, and you're probably not going to run into that problem too often, but it does grind my fucking gears a bit. We had this discussion with the people who built the system that the site was built on. It's a fairly well-known system, I won't name names. And they just came back to us saying, yeah, that's something you need to take up with Google. I'm like, sorry, what? Have you ever tried talking to Google? Have you ever tried talking to Google? Raise your hands. Anybody ever get an answer from Google? Unless you pay-per-click, in which case you always get an answer. But, you know, they hate SEO, so there you go. No, the problem is that we don't need to generate daily fucking sitemaps. We need to generate maybe weekly or monthly sitemaps, which then have more URLs in them, which means we don't have to submit more than 400 to Google in an indexing sitemap, which means then we can hopefully get more interesting data out of Search Console with regards to how many articles are being indexed and how quick they're being indexed. Next one. Does Google crawl JavaScript? Who thinks the answer is yes?
Depends.
When it can be asked.
You're all wrong. Google does not crawl JavaScript. Referring back to these three different processes. The crawler, the indexer, the query engine. I'm not going to talk about the query engine, but that's just the front end. The crawler and the indexer. The crawler is Googlebot. All that Googlebot does is look at fucking source code. This is what Googlebot does. Doesn't do anything with it. It just looks at source code, tries to extract URLs, i.e. links, to follow, to add back to the crawl queue. This is an actual screenshot of the page source code of one of my clients. If you can find a link in there, good fucking luck. Because all that this does is trigger JavaScript, which then executes and renders a page. The crawler can't do anything with this, absolutely nothing. What the crawler then does, it just sends it to the indexer. The indexer renders it. The indexer executes the JavaScript. And then sees the content, finds the links in it, sends those links back to the crawler. So Google does not crawl JavaScript. That's the wrong fucking question. Google does actually index JavaScript. And you need to understand these differences. This shit is important, people, because it really determines how we advise our clients to improve their websites. The crawler does nothing with JavaScript, the Googlebot crawler. It's the indexer, Caffeine, that does everything with JavaScript. That renders it in the headless browser and just sees what the hell it can do with it. So what happens in a scenario like this, when the source code is just fucking gibberish and nobody knows what the hell this page is actually looking at, and in fact, the source code is nearly identical for every single page on this website. The only thing that's changed is a little parameter there which tells the JavaScript which content it actually needs to get out there. That's the only thing that changes. So the crawler can do fuck all with this. What it actually does, it bounces it to the indexer, which then renders it, sends the URLs back to the crawler, which then go one layer deeper, and then, oh wait, I still have nothing to really crawl, sends it back to the indexer, and you end up with this ping pong between the crawler and the indexer. It means the crawling of that website is hopelessly fucking inefficient. Hopelessly inefficient. And as a result, despite the fact that it is a ridiculously authoritative website, I think they've got a trust of like 65 or something, less than a third of the pages that they're actually offering are actually indexed. Now we checked the XML sitemaps, all the sitemaps are 200 OK pages, so there's nothing wrong with the URLs in the sitemap. It is just the fact that Google can't physically crawl through the website. And it's trying. 26,000 URLs per day it tries to crawl on average. So it shouldn't have any problem with this. But for the last 6 months, this is the index that is actually dropping a bit. Because it just doesn't want to do that ping-ponging between the crawler and the indexer all the time. And that is why server-side pre-rendering is so important when you do that JavaScript shit, so that the crawler just sees the rendered HTML, including all the links, can follow those links and crawl the whole website in one fucking go. Which is what we're working on right now, but, you know, developers. Slightly controversial, yeah? Now, to wrap things up everyone time, yeah? You don't have to hook me up.
I wouldn't disagree with it.
Very simple tactic. How do you get a rich answer snippet in Google search results? How do you get something like that? It's actually fucking easy. It really is. The caveat is you need the top 5 ranking, maybe top 7 ranking. You need to be seen as a slightly authoritative result already. And then what you need to do is mark this content up in such a way that search engines can just take it and slap it into search results. I always had this impression that it was probably structured data that drove this. And I was wrong. Structured data has fuck all to do with this, because all that this is a table. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, an old-fashioned table. You know, those things we tried to get rid of for the last 15 years and replace with nice-looking CSS? Yeah? No. Use fucking tables. Open your front page 2000 again and start building tables. Because that shit actually works. Seriously, all we did was we padded the content a little bit, we threw a table in there with prices. The next fucking day, we had that rich snippet right there. And it's still there today, at least I checked yesterday and it's still there. So if it's there gone today, Google really hates my guts. There you go. Sometimes you get nice little side effects where Google thinks it should serve a rich snippet, a rich answer snippet. It depends on how you look at it. I mean, I'm quite happy with this, if I'm entirely honest. The definition for polemic or polemicist, shown as the rich answer for my fucking name, is quite awesome. But again, I didn't ask for that. It's just Google interprets the content as an answer and just slaps it right in its search results. And all that this is an ordered list. That's all it is. A couple of bullet points. And Google thinks that's relevant because a lot of people link to that website with my name as the anchor text, and thus, boom, there's your rich answer. So this shit is fairly easy. And you have to start paying attention to these sorts of snippets, because people will interact with screens less and less, and people will start talking to their devices more and more. And this is the sort of data that those devices will be talking about. This is the sort of answers your Google Home, your Amazon Echo, your whatever, is going to read out to your customers when they ask, hey, what is today's home heating oil price? And decide whether or not they want to place an order. This is Google testing out if it can use this sort of stuff for voice search. These knowledge results, these little rich answer snippets, are Google just testing out whether or not it's smart enough to provide the right answer for its voice search system. And voice search is going to be half of all search by 2020, more or less. So don't be lazy about this, experiment with this. You'll be surprised what kind of voice search snippets you can actually get, and how easy, relatively, it is to trigger those little snippets. Like I said, the caveat is you probably need a top 5 ranking to start with. That's it for me. Thank you very much.